It wasn't a plane. It wasn't a ship. It flew just a few meters above the water, faster than any boat, and too low for radar to track. This is the Ekranoplan, a Cold War marvel so strange and powerful. The CIA called it the Caspian Sea Monster. But what happened to this flying ship? And why did the world abandon one of the most radical machines ever built? Welcome to FutureForge, the home of forgotten machines, secret projects, and futuristic tech that almost changed the world. Today, we explore a Soviet invention that seemed like pure science fiction, the Ekranoplan, built to carry missiles, troops, or cargo at jet speed across the ocean's surface, unseen and unstoppable. This is the story of the flying ship that defied physics and history. The Ekranoplan is a ground effect vehicle, or GEV. It flies just above the water using a cushion of high-pressure air, like a hovercraft and an airplane merged into one. This wing-in ground effect reduces drag and allows massive loads to move at incredible speeds with minimal fuel. In the 1960s, Soviet engineers led by Rostislav Alexeyev created the KM Ekranoplan, the largest aircraft in the world at the time. 540 tons, 10 engines, armed with nuclear missiles, designed to evade radar, cruise at 500 kilometers per hour, and strike NATO targets from sea level with almost no warning. When U.S. satellites spotted the KN in 1967, they had no idea what it was. It was labeled the Caspian Sea Monster, a term that stuck. Analysts were baffled. Was it a plane? A boat? A super weapon? The military potential was massive. Transport entire battalions across oceans without detection. But the Ekranoplan had limitations. It could only fly in calm waters, had limited maneuverability, and suffered from crashes and complexity. One crash of the prototype killed the project for nearly a decade. As the Cold War ended, so did the funding. The Ekranoplan was expensive, massive, and didn't fit into modern naval strategies. The last working model, the Lun-class Ekranoplan, was mothballed, its missile launchers never used in combat. Today, engineers in Russia, China, and the US are revisiting ground effect vehicles for transport, logistics, and even military use. With today's materials and AI-assisted control systems, the Ekranoplan might rise again, sleeker, smarter, and deadlier than ever. Flying boats have been around since the beginning of flight. Perhaps this was a legacy of the war in Vietnam, which began just 2 years earlier. Within 3 years, he had a design for a flying ship that could carry up to 500 soldiers or 40 vehicles across the waves at 60 miles per hour. But it didn't look like any boat or plane anyone had ever seen before. It resembled a giant wingless airplane with 2 long hulls extending below it. Soon, Benson found himself talking to a man who understood his vision. Sergei Lavokin was one of the leading aircraft designers in the Soviet Union, and he loved the idea of the flying ship. The original Ekranoplan was a behemoth, standing 100 feet tall and stretching 540 feet long. It weighed 540 tons. The immense size was necessary to accommodate the enormous amount of air needed to generate lift. This meant that the Ekranoplan was too heavy to take off from the ground, so it had to be launched into the air from a special floating dock. For starters, it was incredibly complex, requiring a highly skilled crew to operate. While trying to take off from the Caspian Sea, the ship lost control and crashed, killing several crew members. It was retired in the early 1980s, although many believe it was due to the collapse of the Soviet Union rather than any inherent flaws in the design. Nevertheless, the Ekranoplan remains an impressive feat of engineering and a reminder of the incredible potential of this unique form of transportation. This disaster led to a complete overhaul of the design, resulting in a smaller, more nimble version known as the Raketa. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching. Although this new version was much improved, it was still far from perfect. It was also vulnerable to rough seas and could only travel in calm waters. Plus, the sheer size of the ship made it difficult to hide, meaning that it was easy for enemy radar to detect. Once airborne, however, the ship was virtually unstoppable. Together, Benson and Lavokin assembled a team of the brightest minds in the Soviet Union and set to work designing a new flying ship, one that could be built, tested, and deployed in record time. Air flown through ducts in the upper hull would push down against the walls of the lower hulls, generating enough lift to keep the craft airborne. Now, the Soviets had invested heavily in aviation already, but they were skeptical of spending more money on an untested concept. The solution was to build a prototype as quickly as possible and then prove them wrong. Working around the clock, the team managed to complete a full-scale wooden mock-up in just a few months. It was large, clunky, and looked more like a barge than a flying ship, but it was exactly what they needed to get started. But the real magic happened when the flying ship reached cruising altitude. As it skimmed across the waves, the air pressure under the main body of the ship would equalize with the pressure above, canceling out the wave drag and allowing the ship to ride the waves like a surfer on a big board. Although it required a crew of up to 150 people to operate, it was still far more efficient than traditional transportation methods. Each ship was armed with up to 8 nuclear missiles, giving them the ability to strike targets deep within enemy territory. This made the Ekranoplan a formidable weapon of war, one that could easily turn the tide of any conflict. In fact, the speed and efficiency of the Ekranoplan made it the fastest way to transport large amounts of cargo over long distances. America was once again fighting a war where transporting supplies and troops across the water was a major challenge. It could fly it. The possibilities were endless. All told, the ship would be 550 feet long and powered by 4 turbofan engines mounted in the rear of the fuselage. These would draw air in through ducts in the upper hull and force it downward, generating enough lift to keep the ship aloft. The air would exit through the lower hulls, creating thrust and propelling the ship forward. Up until now, helicopters had done the job, but they were slow, dangerous, and often got shot down. What the U.S. military really needed was a flying ship. Sounds impossible. Well, it was. But Benson believed that such a vessel was possible if he could marry the wing of an airplane to the hull of a boat. His vision was simple yet brilliant. Make the wings just above the surface of the water, creating a wall of air between the craft and the waves. This would effectively cancel out most of the wave drag, allowing the flying ship to glide across the water at high speeds. It was similar to a helicopter, but far more efficient. By harnessing the power of the air cushion, Benson's flying ship could travel further, faster, and carry more than anything else available at the time. Igor Benson knew this very well. He was one of the fathers of modern helicopter design, having worked alongside Igor Sikorsky on the iconic CH-37. He helped develop the first tandem rotor helicopter, but his career took a sharp downturn after falling out of favor with the Soviet government. He and his family moved to America, where he was hired by Cayman Aircraft to help improve their designs. But it was his later work that would be the most groundbreaking. The year was 1962, and Benson was ready to put his stamp on history with the Caspian Sea Monster. The Japanese Navy was fierce, and American supply ships crossing the Pacific risked getting sunk. At least until May 1943, when the German submarine U-boat was invented. This innovative new vessel offered greater speed, further range, and a powerful new weapon to fight in the Atlantic. No longer did they need to surface to fire their torpedoes. Hidden beneath the waves, German U-boats sank hundreds of Allied vessels while taking minimal damage themselves. Victory in the Atlantic was within reach. Suddenly, the tables had turned. If only there was some way to deploy these deadly submarines across the Pacific. Fast forward to the height of the Cold War, America and its NATO allies were outnumbered by the Soviet Union by over 3-1. Plus, most of those Soviet forces were positioned just a stone's throw away in the surrounding seas of Europe. So something had to be done. This time, the US needed to cross the seas undetected and strike first. But how could they possibly pull this off? To answer that question, the U.S. Navy turned to an engineer named Igor Benson and asked him to solve an impossible problem. They wanted a ship that could skim across the waves at near jet speed, carrying important payloads over long distances without being detected by enemy radar. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Benson would not build a boat, he would build a flying boat, but there was a problem. Now, the U.S. Navy wasn't expecting what Benson was about to show them, but they knew they needed something big. So Benson set to work building a mock-up, testing theories, and pouring everything he knew about aerodynamics into his new invention. The ship was designed to carry all sorts of military hardware, tanks, trucks, jeeps, ammunition, supplies, personnel, you name it. There was just one small problem, though. The ship was impossible to build, or was it? But before they could get started, they needed to convince the Soviet government to fund the project. The Soviets gave the project the green light, and soon the team was hard at work building the first Ekranoplan, a massive flying ship unlike anything ever built before. Moving at speeds of up to 500 kilometers per hour, it could carry up to 10,000 soldiers or 5,000 tons of cargo. But it wasn't just the size and speed of the Ekranoplan that impressed the Soviets. It was also the amount of firepower it could carry. However, despite its impressive capabilities, the Ekranoplan was far from perfect. These limitations became all too apparent during one of the Ekranoplan's first test flights. The Ekranoplan was a machine from the future, trapped in the past. A flying ship that broke the rules, stunned the world, and then vanished into obscurity. But one day, it might return, just as suddenly as it disappeared. Which Cold War invention should we cover next? Drop your ideas in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to FutureForge, like the video, and turn on notifications, because there's a whole world of forgotten technology still waiting to be uncovered. Until next time, keep forging the future.